Hi everyone, welcome. I'm preparing to check in on these two systems here. These systems have European night crawlers living in them, and only 10 days have passed since the last check-in, but it seems like they're probably going to be due since the stuff they got last time were just the leaves of radishes and some frozen cabbage. Didn't seem like a feeding that would last very long. I did deploy a good bit of dry leaves as the foundational bedding for that feeding, so maybe some of that will remain. But I got another fairly small size feeding for them today, and today on day 222, this will be feeding number 20. So I'm going to get a glove on, get these systems up on the bench, and we're going to get them fed. So let's get to work. After shooting that opening clip, I looked around and I've got a fan that's blowing a couple of my systems, trying to dry things off there. I had my window open with traffic buzzing by. I'm wondering if now, in this clip, we're going to be able to tell if there's a significant difference in just the ambient background noise. Hopefully it helps a little bit and cut down some of the racket. So I got coffee for these little guys today. So my thinking was that the old feeding zone indicators could get used as supplementary bedding, and then we would just deploy these replacements, since the food will be the coffee and these, what is it, potato peels, apple peels, maybe some other things mixed in. So it's not a very large feeding, but it's the previous feeding of cabbage and the leaves of radishes, which to me seem like a very quick, both of those things seem to me like fairly quick composting food items. So it is pretty interesting because, you know, most of my systems, as you saw here, all we had out here other than the feeding zone indicators was a couple sheets of newspaper, and it's been that way for a couple feedings now. And here we've definitely got like moisture right there on the surface. And I always thought that just a sheet of newspaper would be enough to allow for enough ventilation that the top surface would go pretty dry, but we're maintaining moisture here pretty good. I think it was during the last check-in too that we encountered worm cocoons, and when I've got one staring me right there in the face, I can't seem to resist reaching out to touch it, but a lot of times they're right there and you don't notice them because they're so tiny. But it does seem to me like every now and then when I finally just slow down a little bit and look around, I start observing them. So I saw a worm over here kind of out near the surface, and where that worm's crawling there's a noticeable little dedent. But alright, let's get to work on this. Over here in bin number 1 we've got a compostable bag test going on, and we always begin the feeding of these systems here by cautiously removing that test item, which now has been going for over a year. And I've gotten feedback from people recently saying that, you know, forget a year, you're probably talking about 2 or 3 years before that test ends. So I've been kind of toying with the idea of just bringing that experiment to a close, and that would kind of prevent us from ever really seeing the compostable bag vanish here in the worm bins. And I'm just starting to wonder if I possibly got things mixed up over here a little bit. Definitely a little bit uncertain as to whether this is even where the compostable bag test is, because I don't see any sign of it. And we usually kind of go out of our way to position it right there in the middle so that it'll be really, really obvious that this is what it is, because it's right where it should be. But it wouldn't be too surprising if my latest worm bin video gaffe was me just totally spacing out on which system I was in, thinking it was a different one. But you know what, we just encountered the compostable bag, and yes, I am being very delicate with the thing, because our whole aim with this has been to explicitly not be the cause of it breaking down, not tearing at it, not crumbling it or anything like that. In fact, it does almost feel like me lifting it up that way just by one strand holding the bottom part of it. It's a little bit abusive, so the things, I don't know, seems to be making slow and steady progress, but I've had some comments that would suggest that it's just almost like a waste of time. So other slow composting items probably won't take quite as long as a compostable bag as the outer husk of a mango seed. Here we've got a fairly large stem of a pepper, I believe, and probably some other leftovers. But in the process of trying to hunt down that compostable bag test, we did manage to open up a fairly decent sized hole down here. You know, not only on the surface am I experiencing a lot of dampness when I first opened the system, and right there, right underneath where the paper was, to see how damp things are is surprising in itself, but here I'm still feeling the dampness as I work my way through the material, which is not too surprising, I guess, if you think about it. And I'm liking the idea that we've now blended in a good bit of that leafy matter that came in here dry last time. I think we're going to probably stick to using dry bedding again today, but not leaves this time, because, you know, I spent a good bit of time yesterday shredding a whole bunch of cardboard and paper, and eventually that stuff's going to be used to build a couple worm bins to supplement my prepared bedding mix supply, to and then just have a little bit of it handy, you know, in case you need something just dry, you know, and not prepared and not dampened like my prepared worm bin bedding is, all nice and damp. I got some nice dry cardboard here, cardboard and paper mix that I think we can use as the foundational bedding for today's feeding, and maybe we'll eventually start seeing the system give up some of its moisture to be absorbed into some of those dry beddings that we've been using lately. Maybe end up with some material that's perhaps a little less muddy. Because at some point we're probably going to want to think about harvesting these castings, and then it's just always easier somehow when the stuff flows freely and doesn't clump the way you see here. And I've got a hunch that perhaps being pretty generous with the bedding is a way to accomplish that. Oops, looks like our glove just gave away. But I got to step away because I got to get that bedding. I'll be right back. So here's that stuff that we're going to use as the bedding for the feeding. But before we do that, I'm noticing little bits of movement here and there, and perhaps we'll spray a little bit more of it in at the end too, but I figured before I forget, get some of this BTI mosquito dunk solution in here, just in case we have any flying insects with any bright ideas about moving in here. That stuff should hopefully control them to a certain point. So I liked that feeling of being able to blend in that leafy matter that we used last time. That was kind of nice. I bet you it's going to help the structure of the material all over. Hopefully reduce a little bit the kind of clumpiness that we're seeing here. And while I like to keep some of my younger systems pretty damp, once systems get a little bit older like these, I do feel like it's time to start cutting back on the moisture content and give the system a little bit of an opportunity to breathe. So before we pile in today's, as I said, kind of modest food, let's return the compostable bag. We'll put it right out here on top of the old feeding zone indicator / bedding at this point. And I don't know, somehow it seems to me like if we got this thing spread out as best as we can get it, then, you know, perhaps it'll see a little bit more traffic than if not, if it was just in a big clump or bundle. So I suppose piling some yummy foods right on top of it probably wouldn't hurt either. And then at the end we'll make sure we sprinkle some coffee on there too. Yeah, not a lot of food here. Definitely not a lot, but I had some coffee, a couple days worth of coffee beginning to pile up, and it had to go. And after 10 days it seemed like these little guys were probably due for a feeding, so I figured let's pop in here and give them a little checkup, give them a little bit of a treat, you know, just for the sake of trying to increase traffic over there. I figured throw in a little bit of my worm chow too. A lot of times the worm chow is included with my coffee getting applied. So why don't we try to keep to our little tradition of doing that here as well. And we've got ourselves a couple nice new replacement feeding zone indicators as well. And I'm wondering, do we perhaps do what we do sometimes, which is just to deviate from exploring all over the place and simply backfilling the feeding zone and letting them be? Maybe we'll do that today instead of always succumbing to our curious, inquisitive nature. Sometimes I like to kind of deliberately not check in on the outer edges of my systems, just because maybe disrupting it so frequently does have a negative effect, and perhaps I'll see some improvement if I don't mess with it so much. I mean, there are plenty of people that demonstrate worm bin operations where the worms definitely don't get fiddled with nearly as much as they get fiddled with here on my channel. I am probably one of the more interactive worm farming channels where I definitely want to see what's going on, and I'm not bashful about digging around to check it all out. So I always just hope that that doesn't cause any sort of ill effects to my little wormy friends. Before we get to covering up, I'm just going to keep at this regularly in all my systems. I've seen little outbreaks of flying insects here and there, nothing too major, and I would almost like to think that this stuff is actually beating it back at this point, so it's more like just the beginning of the end. As far as, hopefully, as far as the flying insects hanging around in my systems. So that's just one of those things where I got to keep my fingers crossed and hope that the mosquito dunks does its job. Alright everyone, that's it for our check-in now with the now 222-day-old European Nightcrawler systems getting feeding number 20. Things are still pretty damp in here because of, I guess because of the system not being quite old enough yet to have extra measures taken to try driving it towards harvest. At this point, keeping things damp is one good way to ensure nice worm bin activity. So I got a few things to take care of getting cleaned up, put away, clearly. But I'm not going to keep you around for that. That's boring. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.